Hello, welcome to the Let's Talk Kids Health Facebook Live Show, episode 43. I'm Dr. Narissa Bauer, your host. I'm a behavioral pediatrician and CEO of Let's Talk Kids Health. As you know, the concept of this show is to share information about behavioral health, parenting, and family wellness. Each week, I plan to bring you topics and guests to help me advance this mission so that we can all talk together. Now, let us know that you're here by commenting and asking questions. This episode was pre recorded. However, we will be monitoring the chat box and actively responding to your questions during the show. So be looking in the comment box for our responses. The replay will be immediately available after the broadcast. So please share this episode with anyone that you think who could benefit because sharing is caring. And if you don't want to miss future episodes or maybe check out some of the past ones, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Narissa Bauer MD, and follow my blog Facebook page, Let's Talk Kids Health. Now the housekeeping stuff is over, so let's introduce this week's guest. Dr. Kristen Steppe has been a general pediatrician at her practice, Pediatric Partners. It's a private practice, and she's been there for over 20 years. She is active on social media to help promote healthy living and give factual information for kids and their parents. Now, as the parent of two young adult children, she has recently filled her spare time with volunteering in her community with special needs children and the local CHAD chapter. We're going to be talking about CHAD, but for those of you who don't know, CHAD stands for Children and Adults with ADHD, which was founded in 1987. Thank you for joining me on the show. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic, COVID vaccine, kids, and the pandemic. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a
Yeah.
great opportunity.
Yeah, so, we've been following each other for a very long time on social media. I'm a
Mhm.
really big fan, and I'm so glad to finally get you on the show. For those watching, do you mind just giving us a little introduction about yourself?
You already mentioned, excuse me, I am a pediatrician. I've been in practice for over 20 years, have two adult kids, um, and they kept me busy when they were here. And now that they are no longer living in the house, I have lots of free time to do all kinds of things. I've been blogging and been trying to shift more as social media has grown to more of that, and happy to share good information online because there's so much misinformation. And this topic that we're going to talk about today really, really begs the question of what is helpful information versus hurtful and harmful.
Yeah, and I will say I've been a big fan of all your social media work. You have been always really great at, crafting and really, culling what's important and bringing that
Mhm.
to the forefront. And this is such great time because as we all know, the emergency use authorization for the COVID vaccine has been authorized for kids 5 to 11. Yay. And so I know there's a lot of questions about the COVID-19 vaccination. So why don't we just go ahead and jump in with our first question? So why is it that we're recommending this vaccine for children?
I think there's many, many things we need to consider. First and foremost, I think a lot of people think that the COVID infection is very mild in kids, so we don't need to protect them with the vaccine. But in reality, in some kids, it is very significant. The 5 to 11-year age group in particular that was just authorized to get the vaccine is the highest risk group for the MIS-C. Which is multi-system inflammatory disease in children. And that ends a lot of kids in the hospital. Certainly, most kids do very, very well, but we do not know which ones will have the need for hospitalization or which ones will have more significant, just long-term effects. I'm sorry, my voice is going and it hasn't been bad all day. I'm going to take a drink here. I'm so sorry about that. But anyway, they most of the time do fine, but some kids have a significant amount of long-term effects. It could be chronic fatigue, it could be shortness of breath, it could be lack of smell or taste, which then affects their nutrition. And these are not kids that were hospitalized. So when you look at just the hospital numbers, we're missing out on the fact that some kids have minor infections, but long-term effects from those infections. And then, of course, they can also share with their friends and family. So they, unfortunately, know if they got their grandmother sick and their grandmother has significant infection or someone else that they get very sick. We know that as long as kids are able to get sick, they also have to quarantine a lot. And so they're missing out on school and activities. And we learned so much during the lockdown, how important school is, actually being in school for these kids. And I know a lot of areas, kids are not allowed to do virtual learning anymore. So if they're quarantined, they just miss those days of school in our area. I don't know how all the areas of the country are doing that, but it's a very significant amount of lost time if they have to be quarantined each time they're exposed.
Right. And that is so true. I mean, kids with thinking and learning differences, being in person is the best option for them. And I think for many of us who are trying to balance teacher hat plus working hat and everybody in the house, I mean, I
Mhm.
think we just know that kids thrive in school and we need to keep them in school as much as possible. I think obviously, there's a lot of questions in general about vaccines. This has not been anything new. General pediatricians have always had to have this conversation with families about vaccine safety. But do you mind that? So let's go into our next question. So, how does the COVID-19 vaccine work?
I'm going to focus just on the Pfizer version, the mRNA version, because that's the only one that's approved in the United States right now under 18 years of age.
Yep.
Um, it is a fabulous vaccine, though. And a lot of people are worried about mRNA because it's a new technology, but it has been studied for many, many years. It is just now actually having a place that can be used. The mRNA technology can be rapidly developed. These vaccines can be rapidly produced, which is really helpful for getting it out to the masses. And all it is this little instruction of how to make the spike protein. We've all seen the spike protein on the pictures of the coronavirus. The SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, has a very specific spike protein. And that spike protein is how the virus gets into our cells. And by teaching the body to recognize that spike protein, we can keep the infection from getting into us and causing damage. So all the vaccine is this little instruction of how to make the spike protein. And it's packaged in this little lipid thing. And within 72 hours or so, that instruction goes away. So people are worried about the vaccine causing long-term damage or other issues, and it simply doesn't. The way it works is it just leaves instructions of how to make that spike protein, then it goes away. And then our immune system goes to work learning about that spike protein and recognizing it, making memory cells, and all of those things that it does is part of its thing that it would do in some response to the natural infection, because it can recognize the spike protein in a natural infection, but that's not universal. Some immune systems will pick a different part of the protein, maybe, or not at all part of the protein or part of the virus to make memory cells. So it's a lot less universal in how your immune system responds to an active infection. So the mRNA vaccines are much more reliable in making our immune systems work.
Yeah, and I appreciate the fact that you brought up the fact that this is not necessarily new technology. It's just new technology to applied to vaccines in to get this out quickly to the
Right.
masses, which is great.
Yeah, I think new scares people,
Yep.
and people want to know that it's been used for generations, and we're not going to have that. And we have to remember that COVID hasn't been around for generations. We know how other viruses work, but we don't know how COVID is going to work long term. I know that I'm old. I can get shingles from the chickenpox disease that I had as a child. It took years, but they've made shingles vaccines. We don't know what is going to come from SARS-CoV-2 and how long it will take to develop protections against those potential later effects. So,
Hmm.
um,
And
yeah.
it is great that we had the science available to be able to pivot so quickly and respond in such a big public health way to help provide protection to so many people.
Right.
Um, I guess the next question, though, that we get about this is obviously so the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending vaccination for all children as soon as they're eligible, right? As
Mhm.
long as they don't have any contraindication. But, this question about safety, I mean, I think you sort of alluded to that, but is there any other points that you want to talk about in terms of, what to expect on the day of,
Mhm.
longer term, especially if parents want to be able to prepare their children for what to expect.
Yeah, I think as with many virus or vaccines, rather, we know that it can cause side effect of soreness of the arm, maybe a fever, headache, body aches. All of those are common with vaccines. It is not recommended to pre-treat with any pain reliever. You can use a pain reliever if it's necessary, but most kids find that they don't need it. One of the really fortunate things, especially for the 5 to 11-year age group, is their dose is a third of the dose of the adult dose. So we're, in the studies at least, have seen a lot fewer side effects in those kids. So that's very nice for them. And even in the 12 to 16, 12 to 18-year-olds that I have vaccinated so far in the past couple months, they seem to have fewer side effects than their parents did. And I think it's just the way our immune systems work. Kids are very resilient, and it's great. Now, we do see the myocarditis in the teen group, and I know that's always a contention for parents. The good news for the 5 to 11-year-olds that are now newly authorized to get the vaccine, that age group in general doesn't get myocarditis as often as older teens and young adults. We do know that myocarditis happens after viral infections. And in fact, after an infection with COVID virus, it's much more likely, like 16 times more likely to get myocarditis than from the vaccine itself. And the vaccine-induced myocarditis tends to be pretty mild. That can be treated at home in most instances, whereas myocarditis after infection, those kids get more significantly ill for a longer period of time and have a higher rate of hospitalization. So either way you slice it, it's safer to get the vaccine than it is to get the disease.
Right. And thank you for really pointing that out, because I think when the reports that the vaccine caused or led to myocarditis, I mean, I think you brought up a really good point, is that viral infections can cause myocarditis, but if it is associated with the vaccine, it is much milder, it is manageable. And, those who go on to have actual COVID and end up getting myocarditis, it's, the risk is there.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Much more risk
uh,
than infection itself for
yes.
myocarditis and everything else, all the other
Yep.
loss of smell and heart and lung and everything else.
Yeah. Both my kids are fully vaccinated. My now 12-year-old, recently turned 12-year-old, got her second dose. She just, kind of had a little bit of chills, but then, bounced back and was so excited. And, I know that she's deathly afraid of needles, but she just kind of said, Mom, I have to get it. I have to go and get it. I have to do it. So can you bring me today? Like, she was
Right.
working herself up to get it done. And I knew, she knew that she needed to, and I was just so proud of her. And then my son, who's 15, already, got it. Or he's not 15. He will be 15. He got it and like had no side effects whatsoever. So I'm really proud of those kids who are just kind of being proactive and understand that. And then hopefully now, as the vaccine is much more available, more kids can get it as well.
I
Are you busy in your office, like getting those calls and requests?
Oh yeah. And I know every office is doing things differently. Some offices are not offering it. They're working with the health department. Having school drives. They're doing all kinds of different things, different localities. Our
Hmm.
office is trying to cut down on the phone calls because we're also getting so many phone calls now with sick kids and other things where we actually need to take those calls. So we're asking people to use our portal. And I don't know, how many offices are doing that. But I do think knowing what your physician office is doing is important, or your
Hmm.
community is doing, because it might not be through the pediatrician offices in every locale.
Right. Now, I guess if we can ask the question, because this comes up too, I'm sure. So, what if a child already had an actual COVID infection? Do they need the vaccine?
This is a great question. I'm often told by families that they don't plan on doing the vaccine because they've already been infected. But so many things are not known with infection. Number one is it's a different kind of immune response potentially. Your body might not have recognized the spike protein. It might have recognized a different part of the virus. It might have been a different version of the virus that's out now. And most people don't know what type they had. Do they have alpha, beta, delta, whatever? We know when you get the vaccine, that continues to be studied against the new variants that are coming out. So we know how well protected you're going to be based on studies that are ongoing. We don't know if you've had an infection, how protected you are. And antibody tests don't help us tell that either. Having one antibody test today does not tell me 2 months from now that you're still protected. And we can't rely on those tests because the immune system is much more complex and the antibody test does not tell the whole story. So the unreliability of the immune response and the changes in the virus over time, it is simply recommended to still get the vaccine. The vaccine is safe after having an infection and definitely has benefit over just having the infection.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, and I think there's other questions like I don't know if you've gotten these. Is there any long-term fertility effects
Mm.
of the vaccine? Is there any comment on that, Dr. Steppe?
Lots of families, especially of girls, have
Mm-hmm.
asked that question. I think one of the early reports that was brought up was there's a certain section of the mRNA instructions that are similar to placental protein. So people took that leap to say that if you then got pregnant, the placenta wouldn't function correctly and that would cause fertility issues. The good news is we know that that instruction doesn't really affect fertility in the big scope of things. Many, many women have gotten pregnant, had successful pregnancies after getting infected or during pregnancy. So we do know that it's safe there. And for girls of puberty age, a lot of parents are worried that, giving this before puberty is going to somehow affect puberty. And there's just no plausible mechanism for it to affect puberty. So we don't need to worry about that. Those are just common anti-vaccine trope kind of stamp it on and it will scare people. So they're going to say that. And it really got started with the HPV vaccine. HPV does not affect fertility or puberty, but I hear that concern a lot too. And it just is something that people use that fear. And once that fear is seated, they know that it works.
Mm-hmm. I guess for those watching who are also educators or other pediatricians, other physicians, because luckily, so many people like to watch and talk about these things. And so, what would you tell other physicians watching this? How would you start that conversation with a family in terms of helping them understand the importance and safety of this vaccine?
Um, some of what I just said, I
Hmm.
will let them know that. Just the sheer numbers of the healthy women who have gotten the vaccine and had successful pregnancies after that. The converse too, especially in males, infection has been shown to potentially reduce fertility in males in two ways. One is vascular, it can affect penile erections, and two, the sperm have been shown to be adversely affected. Whether this will be a long-term kind of problem or not, we don't know, but the infection can affect fertility in males. And there's just no way that the vaccine can affect fertility in a negative way. It does help to promote healthy pregnancies and full-term deliveries. Women who have gotten COVID during pregnancy, that is certainly a high-risk condition, and many of those poor mothers and babies have not survived.
Yeah, right. And certainly just in regards to just the rationale for taking proactive steps to do what you can to not only protect your children and yourself, but the rest of the people in the community. Because as we know, it's very infectious. We oftentimes don't know, you know, who's passed what, right? And
Right.
we know that nearly 6.3 million children have been infected with COVID since the onset, and more than 23,000 kids have been hospitalized. I think what are the current numbers in terms of how many kids have actually died from COVID? I think
Over
600 or
I read different numbers. I've seen
yeah,
748, I've seen
yeah.
650. I think, unfortunately, we don't have very good numbers because not all states report, which
Mm,
makes extrapolation difficult, and it's really hard.
yeah. And you did mention that multi-system inflammatory syndrome in kids. Do you have any other things to discuss about that in terms of uh, what the risk is of that to kids if should they get the illness?
Interestingly enough, for a lot of families, they never knew that their kids had COVID because
Mm,
so many kids have either asymptomatic or such mild symptomatic disease that with the acute infection, they do fine. Parents might know that they have COVID, but their kids have no symptoms. And then it's a couple weeks to a month later where kids have really significant fever, diarrhea, breathing difficulties. Multi-system means basically every system of your body can be affected. So these kids can get very, very sick and require hospitalization, and not all of them survive. And of those who do survive, they can have long-term complications related to whatever systems were inflamed. So we don't know the long-term prognosis for a lot of these poor kids.
Hmm. Yeah. So, if we're going to, since we're going to be ramping this up, I mean, are there any take-home points that you want families to take away from watching this episode?
I think the biggest thing that I really want to share with people is this is a safe thing to do. The vaccine is safe. I know there's a lot of unknowns with all of this, but when you look at all of the risks of the vaccine versus the risks of the infection, the vaccine always wins with safety. And we have to layer protections. We know that it's not 100% safe, just like my seatbelt's not 100% safe. I also have to use airbags and pay attention to the speed limit. And when it's raining, I put the windshield wipers on. I can turn the windshield wipers off as the conditions change. And I think we need to respond to the conditions of um, how fast COVID is spreading in the community. I still wear a mask. And until our community rates go down quite a bit, even though I'm triple vaxxed, I am going to still wear my mask in public places. We are allowing our families to do more things now because everyone adult wise in our family, and hopefully all the younger kids in the extended family will soon be vaccinated. But that allows us to do more. And so if we can all get vaccinated, that can help our communities heal and get back to more normal.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And, I think this episode will get a lot of questions and spark a lot of
Mhm.
conversation. So, as I said, please, while you're watching this, go ahead and put some comments, any questions. And again, we'll be monitoring this, even though this was pre recorded. So that way we can try to answer those questions and make sure you get the right information. So, Dr. Steppe, if folks want to hear more about kind of the work that you're doing, I know that you
Mhm.
do a lot with your local CHAD chapter as well. Um, go
Mhm.
ahead and let us know. How can they follow you, find you, all of that?
On if they're on Twitter, they can find me at Pediatrics KC, Facebook, ADHDKC.org
Mhm.
has a Facebook page and a Twitter feed as well. Um, and ADHDKC.org is the website there. That's probably easiest. Um, my office has social media, and I do all of these because, again, my kids are out of home. And I do have on my mantle, we are like such geeks about getting vaccinated. The 4 little photos that are up there that don't usually
Uh-huh.
belong on our mantle, those are the 4 of us right after we got our vaccines.
Oh,
So we started that, and yeah, I think those are going to be up there for a long time because it was such a relief as each member of our family got vaccinated, and I hope that others can do the same.
yeah, thank you so much. And this is I keep thinking it's like the beginning of November. Obviously, we're looking at the holidays fast approaching. I think your sentiment about how just that sense of relief, and I know for many families who have been really trying to isolate, protect their loved ones, now they're finally able to get most of their family members vaccinated. So I can't imagine the joy that people are going to be having this holiday season as they can finally feel like they could potentially kind of do that and enjoy the holidays again. So,
Right. And
yeah.
if they still have kids that are not fully vaccinated, I mean, the kids that got vaccinated right away,
Hmm.
it takes time for the 3 weeks before the second dose and then time after that. So those kids are still not fully protected at Thanksgiving. By
Yep.
Christmas, maybe, but not Thanksgiving. So still be safe with your kids and mask as much
Masks.
as
Hmm.
possible. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Or those little HEPA filter room things that the Corsi Rosenthal boxes that were so popular in the schools. You can do those in your home if you're having a big gathering.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that reminder. That's really important. So even though your kids might be getting the first shot and all of that,
Mhm.
as Dr. Steppe has has reminded us that there's that period of time in between the two doses and then a period of time after the second dose for full immunity to really be on board. So it's always important to continue masking. Well, so thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And like I said, we'll be monitoring the chat box for any comments. I do want to let you guys know that watch the show regularly, that my guest for next Thursday will be Kim Freeney, who will be talking about play therapy in children. Now, if you have any recommendations for guests or topics, please contact me at Dr. Narissa at letstalkkidshealth.org. And then just follow my YouTube channel, all my social media platforms. You can drop me a message, comment below, let me know about a topic that you're interested in, and I'll do my best to procure an expert to come and talk to me about it. And then just a plug, because we are in November, and as you know, I do run a free parenting book club. This month's book club pick is Driven to Distraction by Dr. Edward Hallowell. Highly recommend this book. I'm about two-thirds through the way, and Dr. Hallowell has agreed to do an author book club chat with me in mid-December. So read the book, get a copy at the library, or I'll include the link to the book, and read. And let's talk about it. Let's keep talking. Um, so, thank you again. I hope you found this episode informative. Please remember to share this episode with anyone who you think could benefit. And again, thanks, Dr. Stuppy, for your time.
Thank you very much.